healthcare. I don't see anyone in the audience. All I see is big white signs in front of me. Other people out there. Hi. So, with that, I'm going to ask that Wayne Hospital or Wayne Healthcare, I should say, should kick it off, and any questions, and at any point in time, if anyone has questions and you have some things here, all people have handouts, so Wayne.
I think I know most everybody here, and I thought I'd start with a little brief history about how we've come here this evening. I came here in 2006, and at that time we hired some consultants to come in, and we involved about 120 people from throughout the community. We had teachers, I think we had people from city council, previous mayors and other people, and we said, what do you want to see in a hospital? And we put together a strategic plan. Out of that strategic plan, we developed what's called a master facility plan, because essentially, if you probably remember from about that time, the newest part of the hospital was built in about 1991, and we were operating and still operate a part of the hospital from 1938. So essentially, with the master facility plan, we decided we would redevelop the entire facility. So in 2007, we started a construction plan that led to what is currently the main lobby. And one of the things you probably have seen with the hospital is from the old brick exterior, we've now gone to a precast concrete and glass type of setup, which is much more contemporary. And we intend to continue in that direction. The other thing we found out is that we couldn't build everything all at once. So the first project we had was $47 million. We were very fortunate in that my predecessors and a lot of good board people from the hospital had saved about $50 million. So we were able to get some bonds that were public bonds at a very nice rate, and keep our $50 million in the bank. So that has worked out well, so that today, of that $47 million, we now owe about $24 million, and we have right around $100 million in the bank. So we're ready to build a little bit more. So we're in pretty good shape. So as we went through the process, we decided what we would like to do is to see more than a city hospital, which is what we were. We're bounded by, basically, originally, by Marks and Fair and Schweitzer and Central. And then sometime way back, probably in the late 80s or that time, you all abandoned Mark Street between Central and Schweitzer, and we built all the way out to Sherman. So the current plan that we have now is to have what we call a campus, and our ultimate goal is to have the campus to be bounded by the west side of Harrison Street, the north side of Fair Street, the south side of Sherman Street, and also Schweitzer Street. So when we got to building this next part of the project, we had built the original building to be able to go up 2 more floors. The problem is, since that time, some of the construction ideas had changed, and it really would not fit appropriately going up to floors 5 and 6. So what you're going to hear tonight is a little discussion about how this project will look. By the way, this is a $56 million project. And also, we have gone through with our financial advisors. They have recommended that we pay in cash for half of it. So we intend to pay $28 million in cash and then borrow the other remaining $28 million and probably consolidate that with our existing debt. We are financially in very good shape to be able to keep this hospital going forward, and that is the goal of this, is to be able to have a very first quality facility. And we believe with this construction, we will have everything we need for a true 21st century hospital. The main changes will be, we have not had in the past private rooms. Private rooms are now kind of the standard of care really throughout the country. So this will include all of our rooms to be in a private condition, with the exception of our senior behavioral health unit that we just opened in the past year. They like companionship in that unit, so we do have a number of those beds that are in a semi-private condition, but everything else will be private. We will have a new obstetrics center, replacing the one that is in the 1938 building, and then a very large wellness program. So with that, I'll turn it over to somebody who really knows what he's talking about, and that's Jeff Subler. Jeff, by the way, was the project manager that built the original building, and he is now the vice president of the hospital.
As Wayne mentioned, I'm Jeff Subler. I'm VP, basically over the facilities for the hospital. And I just want to tack on briefly to what Wayne said. So this project will be a continuation of the master facility plan, and we've been working in earnest, the project team, since right before the beginning of the year, developing this plan. A lot of internal meetings with the hospital, as well as some meetings with city departments and the safety service folks to get a feel for what their requirements would be, what their needs would be. So as we develop this plan, and it's been massaged since the beginning of the year, we were on board with those items and could react to that. So the plans now are at a preliminary stage yet, but we're comfortable enough that it's what it's going to look like and the footprint it's going to be that we wanted to share with full council and start talking about next steps and what we need to make this a reality. So with that, I'm going to turn it over. We have representatives here from HPlex Solutions, who's our owner's rep, as well as Trinity Planning and Architects, and the site civil engineer, which is Kleinger. So there's a lot of information in front of you. We have a few boards here that we'll go over at a high level, but we'll walk it through and certainly ask any questions during the presentation or at the end. We'll go through the seven steps. So with that, John?
Thank you, everyone. As Mr. DeChambeau and Mr. Subler alluded to, there's a lot of information in front of you, and we're going to kind of give you a high-level overview of where we're at. But HPlex Solutions was engaged by Wayne Healthcare to start this process, this master planning process. So we engaged Trinity and also a construction manager to help with pricing throughout this process. So we're really exploring, this project from all facets. We're looking at the design, we're looking at the civil, the site, and we're looking at the cost for Wayne Healthcare. So if you look on page 3, Jeff and Wayne mentioned that there was a master plan done, and there were strategic goals that were identified, and this slide here outlines what those are. Create a unified campus-like setting for the facility. Maintain public and staff patient traffic and separation. Provide updated and modernized private inpatient rooms. Provide updated and modernized obstetric unit. Look for opportunities to right-size and grow the wellness service lines, and plan for a future medical office building. So that's something that was part of the master plan that we've been studying with our team of architects and engineers. That was identified as a future project. And if you go to the next page, you see a little bit more specifically what is included in this phase 1 hospital expansion. It includes a state-of-the-art special beginnings birthing unit with 2 antepartum bedrooms, 4 postpartum rooms, and 6 LDRP rooms, an expanded lifestyle enhancement and wellness center, a redesigned loading dock and materials management area with improved access, a 32-bed acuity adjustable nursing unit with fully private beds, and a new entry and public concourse linked to the existing main lobby for maximized wayfinding. So, as you can see, most of the strategic goals that were identified in the master plan are identified in this phase 1 expansion, with the exception of that medical office building, which is something that we could explore further down the road. But the project that we have in front of us right now is this phase 1 list here that I've identified, and I'd like to turn it over to Trinity to get into that a little more detail on what that is.
Hi, everyone. I'm Dan Levan, project manager for Trinity Planning, Design, and Architecture. I'm on page 5 of your packet here. I just want to give you a lay of the land in the current hospital. Most of you are probably very familiar with it. On your right, or on your left side rather, is the existing medical office building that's to remain there. Behind, of course, is Central Avenue. The main addition that Wayne and Jeff alluded to from 2010 is this block right here. So you can see dashed in the proposed expansion towards the east. for the program that we've been discussing, and thus the potential closure there of Central Avenue. So I just want to walk you through the plans, at least where they are so far. If you flip to your sheets on page 6, you can see in blue there, on this diagram here, is where the addition is going. One thing I want to mention that's really important about this plan is as the hospital has continued to grow, we saw the need for multiple entrances into the building and throughout the campus. So as the hospital has grown, I know the main entrance for most people is along Schweitzer Street. What we found important was when you start to have multiple entrances, when you get into the building, wayfinding becomes really important. So the access from one side to the other is still accessible across the main floor. So whether I park towards the east or towards the west, I'm not getting back in my car and circulating around the streets there to get back to where I need to go. I can circulate through the building. So that was a really important feature of the master plan. It's something we're carrying through in the design. So once patients arrive, regardless if they got to the right spot or not, they can be directed to once they get inside the building. Sheet 7 is the first floor that you see here. So you see in yellow, that very light yellow, that's the public space that you can walk through. So whether you're coming from the west side or the east, all connects back. So we'll be doing some renovation within the interiors to make that connection all the way through. Special beginnings on the left side, that's the labor and delivery unit. There'll be 6 LDRP rooms, labor and delivery and recovery. So once you come into that room, have your baby, you get to stay in that room and recover all in the same space. We're not moving patients from one place to another. There's also a dedicated OR for C-section in that suite of patients. On the other side is the expanded wellness that John spoke of. So there's an open gym area and various support spaces and ancillary services for that wellness program. And that's all on the first floor. The other important piece in the expansion of this project is for materials management and receiving. Right now it's bifurcated on multiple floors and it's very difficult to get around. So that expansion towards the south side will really alleviate some of those concerns on getting access to patients and supplies throughout the hospital. Move to the second floor. There's an interstitial space between the 2 floors. The older hospital had much tighter floor-to-floor heights. As new construction comes into play and we need more heights, more ductwork, more electrical and all those things, the floor heights get a little bit higher. So we were able to accommodate some storage space on that second floor, but above that, I'm going to continue on to the 3rd floor. That takes up the entire floor plate of that exchange, and that's those 32 patient rooms. So right now we have semi-private rooms for med-surg, and then a separate unit is your ICU, a 6-bed ICU unit. This will combine all of those together into acuity adjustable, meaning whether I'm an ICU patient, a med-surg patient, telemetry, I can all be in the same unit and get staff flowing back and forth. So it actually requires less beds because they're all grouped together on a single unit. They're also same-handed, meaning every room is designed exactly the same. There's been reviews and studies shown that that same-handed approach, where I walk into a room and they're identical every time, leads to better patient outcomes, better flow, and easier to navigate for staff as they go from one room to another. There's some ancillary services as well on the 3rd floor, just with respiratory therapy and physician lounges and things like that. Finally, I wanted to cover just the overall look, the aesthetics of what we've gone through so far. This diagram to help show that. So the 2002 edition, as Wayne stated, did a lot with precast, glass. It modernized the look of the hospital silhouette, and we wanted to be very purposeful with that look so far and continue that look on the east side of the campus. So you can see here, this is the main approach from the east side. Labor and delivery will be along that first floor, wellness along the other side, and we'll have an entrance here that denotes that entrance, and that cut through keeps the main hospital that gives you access to the various services. Up above, where you see the glass here, that's the inpatient unit, and finally the enclosed penthouse on the top to conceal all the mechanical units and things like that for the division. But that's the overall look, that's the approach from the east side looking back towards the hospital. So the main hospital, and Schweitzer Street, just right behind. So we try to be very purposeful in the materiality and continue the look that you have all seen in the previous edition, so it fits in contextually and matches what you've seen so far. With that, go to the overall site plan. I'll let Kyle do it.
Hi, I'm Kyle Weber with the Miners Group. We're the site civil engineers on this project, as well as providing surveying and traffic services for the project. You can see that there are quite a few utilities if you look at page 14 of the layout. Greenville Avenue serving kind of a utility corridor previously, and then main sanitary trunk running along the north side of the site. We'll work through with the group with site civil, coordinating with local storm, sanitary and water to relocate those utilities, as well as with MEP and assistance in relocating other power, communications, other feeds that run through Central and around the adjacent alleys. Other than that, we'll be also working on the site layout with the pavement and circulation and running traffic impact studies, which has basically shown so far with minimal impact to circulation on the site. Turn it over from here.
So as Kyle mentioned, there are a lot of utilities in that street that we're looking at how we relocate those. And we've got some pretty well-developed thoughts about how that's going to happen. We can get into that a little bit more. You'll see following that on page 15, you can see an overlay of the existing site with the proposed building in red on top, and then the new parking lots in blue. So that gives you an idea of the modifications to the existing parking and lots surrounding the hospital. And then page 16, you see the portions of public road that we would need to be vacated to allow this expansion to occur, both the building and those parking lot modifications from the previous page. And we'll get into that a little bit more too, hopefully here. So that's what's in red on page 16. Page 17, which is also this diagram right here, shows the proposed circulation around the site for the different groups that would need to access it. So one of the things that the site plan does for us is makes that a little bit easier than how it is today. You've got one direct route for the emergency ambulance access, and then they've also got a secondary exit through the site up there through east down Mark Street. There's a emergency public access here in purple along the front where the existing main entrance is. There's the public main entrance in purple, and then there's also the existing emergency there in yellow. And then there's a new public access along the back, as Dan alluded to. So that allows you access from the east as well, connection back to Harrison Street there. And then, as Dan mentioned, that connection cuts all the way through the hospital there. So if you end up on this side and you need to be over here, you don't have to get back in your car and go all the way around the building to get from one side of the hospital to the other. And then the other thing is that this plan does is improves the materials management and the access. Right now, I believe they come in off of Central Avenue sometimes, and there's a little bit of maneuvering that has to happen. So we're working with Kleinders and Trinity to develop a more direct materials management for deliveries and any sort of service access to the site along the south end of the building there. Pages 18 and 19 show another process that's underway right now, which is the rezoning of this property. Right now, it is a neighborhood business district, and we are in the process of getting this rezoned to a special use district. So we can talk about that a little bit more if we need to. And then page 20, this is really, I think, where we'd like to get some input and talk about the next steps here. So right now we have, you can see we've submitted a traffic impact study about a week ago, and we are now at the city council workshop. The next steps that we understand need to happen are the rezoning and lot consolidation, the street vacation, the development plan submission, eventually leading us to the building permit. Those are the city processes that we're working towards, and we want to really discuss that street vacation process with you all. And then, as you can see, concurrent to that process, we've got design continuing with the hospital. So we have been meeting with user groups to refine the plans, and we're moving towards design development and construction documents with a goal of a construction start in early 2019. So we really need to be sure that we have all of our ducks in a row with the city processes to make sure we're able to meet that timeline. So from there, I would like to turn it over to you all and, you know, have a discussion about if you have any questions about the information that's been presented. And if I don't know the answer right away, we've got an army of people here who can help me out. So.
I have a question.
Yes.
Page 16 on the street vacation diagram. It seems the vacating the alley to the north there, it vacates it right up to the end of that alley there. Is that going to present a problem for maybe garbage pickup for the residents up in that block? You see where I'm talking about?
So you're talking about really, you can kind of see it here, this piece right here.
Yeah, but I'm talking specifically about this corner.
This corner right here.
Yeah, you're vacating that section right there. Is that going to become a problem with it being blocked?
So,
Can you answer, to answer a question that may help this?
yeah.
You have some black dotted, are those owned by the hospital, or are those still
So these
other owned residents?
These black dotted lines here indicate properties that are not currently owned by the hospital. So, to your point, this property right here is not owned by the hospital currently.
Okay, so a garbage truck coming in, I mean,
Yeah, March
this,
Street.
so
It's the alleyway.
garbage truck coming, because the garbage pickup is in the alley through here, would come here, but would technically dead end on private property, because if the vacation would basically remove the city right away.
Yeah, and on the,
Is that what that's what you're asking, right?
on the other side, this side right here, Kurt. This side right here,
It's
that
a
kind
dead
of,
end there.
that blocks
Where
that
you go into
alley.
Mart's.
Yeah, that blocks that alley. Look at the one right
But
behind.
Mart's is going, but by their proposal, Mart's stays open.
Well, I know, then why would
So-
we have to vacate that
On the-
little corner? That corner right there.
Trying to find it where you're talking about right here, right?
On down.
Trying to figure out if that's
Turns
right
into
here.
parking.
So the access to that
But see, John, that house goes away, that becomes parking lot.
Well, what I'm saying is this alley here, why vacate this? Do we need public access?
So maybe just bring it to the backside.
Yeah. But if you go on it over, they have this.
Oh, I see what you're saying,
Yeah. right.
Yes, right.
Yeah, our intention would be that alley is still accessible and you can still connect to
Right.
Mars to exit.
Okay,
Yes.
that's the open.
Okay, so, and you know, when you're drawing up legal descriptions, you might have to take a look at that.
But what about the other side, because that's a very valid point,
Well,
that
you-
those
yeah.
properties still need,
You still need access for, these are going away.
Mr. Hensley,
Yes, sir.
could you speak up loud enough so that other council members can hear this? Because it's a question that you're raising, but I'm sure others have a concern about it. So make it so that we all can see and understand what you are saying.
Well, this was the first problem that I saw, was if we're basically shutting off the end of that alley, you know, we got garbage pickup and everything on this section, which is still privately held property. And maybe, and if you look at that drawing, it shoots up at an angle right here. do we really need to shut down, vacate this entire portion, or leave it open so that garbage trucks, FD or whatever? But then Kurt brought up, again, on this side, we have the same situation, that we're creating a dead-end alley. So I think that alley vacation kind of needs to be looked at. Not saying that there's not possible.
I think to address the issue on the corner of Mark Street in the alley, that isn't an issue to do as you're saying and allow this to remain public right of way there and vacate there and there. I think we will study this portion here, and if access needs to be maintained along here, which it sounds like it does, otherwise we're creating a dead end alley. The service truck needs to be able to get out somehow.
By your drawing, it appears that the house, that center section to the right of Mark's, that is a hospital-owned property house.
Correct.
And with this particular proposal, that house is not coming down at this point.
Correct.
But if that house came down and you shifted your parking lot to the north, you could almost do the same thing with that street that you're doing to Mark's.
Leave a public access along this side here.
And what, is that a street? That is not currently a street?
No.
No.
What is the idea of putting that whole addition on the back on such a sweep and making all of that different configuration to the back?
That's an architectural.
I can tell you in layman's terms, this is where the ambulances come in.
Yeah.
And we're creating a separation as well as we'll have a visual barrier here. So we will have windows for the OB unit, but then we'll have shrubbery and other things that are out here. And then this allows, I think, access for the ambulances to be able to turn around. I think the other accommodation had to do with what we were talking about, that there's a main sewer line over here too. That's right. That becomes problematic and is addressed by having a little angle on the building.
Right, so that the sort of shift to the addition there maintains that access for the ambulance entry that we mentioned, and also allows us to miss that existing sewer. But there are some architectural benefits to that shape as well. Has to do with the interior layout of rooms.
Yeah, a gentle curve like that helps the interiors a little bit. It helps with vertigo when you don't have a long corridor, especially in a 32-bed unit like that where it tends to be very long. So a gentle curve where you're seeing more of the room access and not a long corridor is helpful to patients.
If you come in our current building in the main lobby and you walk down to the ER, that is a curved hallway. You probably don't notice it. But next time you're in there, take a look.
Okay.
It makes a little curve to the right, and it architecturally doesn't make it look like a long hallway that way. Yeah, the other thing, just so you know, our goal over time, as available, is to own all of these properties, so we have this as an entire campus. So we do have 6 properties back here, and we do have the corner lot back here at Harrison and Fair. And we'd like to continue to have them all.
With the reconfiguring of the sewer and water lines, how is that going to affect that whole section in there? Is any study, or Kurt, can you relate to that?
That's a good segue. I would like to introduce someone at this time.
Okay.
If you would so indulge. Matt, you all have, at the beginning of the year, approved a contract with Choice One Engineering for engineering services, and Matt is the president of Choice One, Matt Hoying. And Matt, along with Chad Henry, has spent a lot of time in reviewing the preliminary drawings and working with the folks from Wayne Healthcare to come up with a solution, because there is water and sewer lines in Central Avenue. And if we were to vacate it, we do not want to, it's just not practical to build on top of those lines for obvious reasons. So with that, I'm going to let Matt speak a little bit about the fact of what they want to do, the fact that we reviewed it, and his opinion if it'll work or not.
Yeah, thanks, Kurt. So Matt Hoying, good evening. We have, myself and other members of my team, looked at these utility relocations and worked quite extensively with Mr. Weber and the Kleinger's group on exactly how we can relocate these. Because our interest is, it's a great project for Wayne Hospital, but we got to look out for the entire city of Greenville, right? So our interest is making sure that any of these relocations aren't going to cause issues with flow or capacity for the remainder of the residents and businesses that are utilizing these utilities. Really, the water system wasn't much of an issue. Able to relocate that, make sure we were able to maintain pressures around the building and around the neighborhood. Didn't cause any issues with the water system. The sanitary sewer, I think it's an 18-inch, if my memory serves, that goes along the north side of the hospital. That was our big concern. An 18-inch sanitary sewer is a big diameter sanitary sewer. We actually, like I said, worked quite extensively with Kyle and his team on making sure the elevations were going to work, that we're going to be able to keep positive drainage through that 18-inch, and that is part of the reason why, as they mentioned, we wanted to make sure that building didn't move that 18-inch any further, because it started to become more and more questionable. The further we move that 18-inch, how feasible would it be to keep that in service and not have to utilize a pump station or something of some other nature. So ultimately, through working through it, yeah, we're going to be able to make that all reconnect, gravity flow. Residents, other businesses won't see any difference in their current utility service. From the city standpoint, it's not going to be any more difficult to maintain than what it currently is. So we did not see any issues with approving this relocation of the utilities as they're proposing.
Can you talk about the storm a little bit? It looks like we're having a lot of impervious area.
Yeah.
And how we're gonna deal with stormwater.
Yeah, and Kyle can jump in here as well. Basically, we've been talking about, we've got to make sure that we're not in any increase in impervious area, we're treating that to the current city standards.
Which is what? Just
Yep. So, the layman's terms here. I'm sorry, I'm an engineer, so I get technical. There's what they call a 100-year rain event, which I think in the city of Greenville is 5.8 inches in 24 hours, roughly. So if you think of a rain that's going to bring about 6 inches of rain over a 24-hour period, how much water that produces when it runs off. The hospital and their team needs to make sure they control that down to the same amount as rain that would fall during a 2-year storm, which is about 2.7 inches, I think. Those numbers are close. They may not be exactly correct, so I apologize for that. But they've got to control that water down to a much more manageable amount of flow that comes off the site and that the city storm sewer can handle. So really, it seems counterintuitive, but developments like this, when we require them to detain the stormwater, it actually makes the downstream storm sewers capacity greater, because now not all of that water is rushing. Now it's all single individual residential homes. Those single homes don't have any requirement to detain their stormwater, to hold their stormwater back. Now that it's one development, there's that detention requirement that's going to hold that water back in whatever system they propose. And he may be able to speak to this more, maybe an underground system, some sort of vegetated planting, swales that hold the water there for a little while and let it soak through the ground slower. That's really up to them. But that's what we're looking for, is making sure that we're not putting any more water downstream than what would happen on a much lower rain event.
So how are you going to address that issue?
Okay, one quick question. What direction would most of that excess water be flowing from a pretty significant rain event? North, south, east, west direction?
West, it goes over towards the Brother's home.
Okay.
And
It's already blown out a tile over there.
And one of the things that's one of the things we make sure is that we're not changing the direction unintentionally. And we don't want to send new water to a new neighborhood, to a new storm pipe that's never seen this water before. But Kyle, you may be able to speak more directly in your guys' effort so far in looking at? I know you've started to look at it. I don't know how far you are in that analysis.
Sure. The goal would be to store it in underground detention units, whether it be pipe or other sort of chamber systems, and work its way around the building to the north where storm sewer already goes up to Sherman. And then from there, it does seem to appear to head west. So we would be outletting all our water to the north where it currently goes through a system of chambers, underground storage. And if we could implement any green infrastructure, we would do that as well as we could with this given site conditions.
Do we have underground right now?
Yeah, we do. In the north parking lot, when we built the original building, we had that same issue. So there was actually water retention underneath that.
There's also parking lot to the, across from the medical building.
Yeah.
We have two structure underground.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's familiar.
And the point of those underground systems is to allow the release in a manner
Controlled
that
manner.
doesn't overextend the existing infrastructure. Is that right?
Correct, that's the goal, and as well, we'll be meeting the
And
current,
then because of EPA rules, I know if we destroy or improve an area greater than X amount, you have to put in the clean water structure. Will they have to do that as well?
Yep, there's, the EPA is in the end of April, updated their regulations on what they call stormwater quality, which basically handles treating that water. And that's, these underground systems typically do very well in that, and they hold the water. They let any, you think of water coming off a parking lot, it's gonna have some dirt, silt, maybe some oils from cars leaking. That gets to settle out or filter out through the systems in these underground detention systems. So that will also be a requirement that we're reviewing in their submittal, that they not only control the amount of water, but they control the quality of the water that's leaving the site.
That being said, then every so often do those things have to be, quote, cleaned out?
Yes.
To take the sediment that's being held back?
Yep. Yeah, every, those should be on a maintenance schedule from the property owners, that every so often there's inspection ports. They can open the cap, look down in there. Usually they can do it different ways. They can use a truck, a vac truck, and just clean it all out, or they can take like a measuring rod, stick it down in there and see how much sediment is in there. Is it 2 inches, is it 6, is it a foot, whatever the case may be, and they're responsible to clean those out.
Question I have then is, the red line represents the EMS units going in and coming out. Are they going to be coming in off of Harrison also, or just one way?
No, that they would, yeah, they're essentially all coming in off Schweitzer, whether they come north or south. So they would go up Sherman and then right into what is now Central.
Okay, now if they're going out
They
on
can exit, yeah, they can exit back out. Mark.
okay, if they're going out to Harrison and going either direction on Harrison, is that going to put a problem with the city as far as residents parking and et cetera on Harrison?
It's not the preferred route of travel. You drive an ambulance, I drive an ambulance. That's not where I want to take my ambulance if I don't have to. I want to keep it on what used to be Central, and I want to come out Sherman. I think Greenville would really be the only one that might exit out that way if they had, say, a second run that they had to respond to. But I don't know that it would be the preferred route. Because, and just in looking at your drawing, it appears you're not going to make that path of travel as wide as what Central is. Is that a fair statement?
This path of travel or this path?
Yeah, that one is not going to be, they're not both going to be the same width. The one going east is going to be much narrower. But it will be wide enough that you could get an ambulance and, say, a car to pass, correct?
Right, and yeah.
It's not a one-way path?
It's not one way, and I think the other point there is that accommodates a fire truck too. So
Because, and that was a route, fire guys can't necessarily see what we're talking about, but we wanted to make sure that we had, able to get a fire truck all the way around, at least on 3 sides of the structure, in case you had to get a ladder. Since we're on that subject, you two guys in green shirts got anything to say about the project? Kind of going clockwise, starting in the bottom left with Sherman. Just a point of a note for the council. Sherman, when you come off of Schweitzer Street, it is a street for obviously 2 lanes of travel plus parking on either side. With the hospital acquiring almost all of that property, and you have one house that has off-street parking, one of the things that we considered was maybe only parking on one side of the street, and with that parking being on the north side of Sherman, between there and Central. And then as you go up, we'll talk a little bit, if you've been in that area, you know that Sherman greatly reduces in width once you cross Central. So they did not mention, but the hospital would propose to give right-of-way to the city, and they would pay to widen Sherman to the same width, or close to what you have there off of Schweitzer, and they would take that width up to the alley that they're looking to vacate, because that is also another entrance into that back parking lot.
But that's not in the original vacation plan right now.
Well, it's not in the vacation plan, but it just goes to, I think if you're making a decision about whether or not we want to give up Central, what's this whole thing going to look like, and what's the impact to the neighborhood with the increased amount of traffic, and we're still in the process of reviewing the traffic impact study.
And since that's our property, we obviously would widen it to the south.
Right. Well, you can't
Right.
from north, because you got to have
Right.
those houses set like right along the side. Now, in some of our conversations, kind of continuing around that corner a little bit, where we talk, it does appear that that portion of the alley is not being vacated. Is that a correct statement as you come off of Sherman? So that is still an alley? So that's gravel right now? Well, it's very poor pavement. It's not great. Our alleys are, it's very poor asphalt. What are you envisioning? Are you envisioning as a part of this project of, even though it's still right of way, is it the hospital's intention to improve that right of way on that backside so it looks more appealing for that parking lot?
Yeah, so as you can see, that's our second public access there. So I'll let Kyle speak to a little bit of the plan is for that portion of the road, but that is an important presentation right here. The north portion of the alley between Sherman and Marks.
Correct. We look at widening that alley since it is a main drive in, it's not only for fire access. It will be one way, but widening that is necessary for fire, as well as repaving is necessary to make that a consistent, uniform.
So,
You said
it is an alley. It's not constructed to be a street.
Correct.
Are you going to construct it to
As far as the section.
like a street grade right away?
Curbs, gutters, and
Right.
sidewalks?
Well, at least, I'm thinking the proper base underneath it, so that it would support the way, if that's a fire truck access, that it would handle that traffic. And it appears that, you're directing traffic that way. You want cars, you want trucks, to drive upon it. It's constructed as an alley now. Would it be constructed to the same degree as what you're gonna widen Sherman?
I would think if the section is not adequate for the capacity or the future loading, it would have to be improved to a section that would meet city standards throughout that width.
Okay.
Not only for the new portion, but then whatever would be required for the alley,
Okay.
existing alley portion.
So then you have Marks, and we already have kind of discussed where hospital property will end and right-of-way will begin. Did that answer, are you clear on that portion of it?
Well, I heard one way.
I just asked if it was going to be, and they said no.
Okay. I just got.
I said one way, I asked the question, because that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Which portion?
Well, I think we're discussing up
This would be
right
two-way.
here, right, as like we talked about that ambulance exit, was that going to be one way or two way, because it was obviously narrower here, than what Central currently is. And your response was this would be narrow through here, but then it would widen out to the full width of what Mark Street is.
Correct here. This is narrower, this widens out. This, I think, was the portion that Kyle mentioned would stay one way.
Oh, so up here
Where
would
the
just be
alley
one
is.
way?
Where the alley
Through
is.
through that alley?
Correct.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Well,
One way.
again, in talking with other projects and our traffic engineer, I guess that was something that would be looked at, but not necessarily, it's not something we necessarily would, well, I guess, why would you want it one way? Just because you don't want to widen it to the width?
You've caught us.
Yeah, I don't think that's.
No, traffic flow, strictly it was a traffic flow decision,
That would
not.
keep cars from going back on the
Right.
Sherman. The flow would be in and then.
But then you're directing them to Harrison, a
Right.
residential street, and we don't want that. I mean, now you're impacting the rest of the neighborhood. We want all that traffic to go back out to Schweitzer. And again, I don't mean to get into, and those are things that we can talk to, but I think those are things that the council has to understand or say, you know, if you want Central, this is what we want as the city.
That's what I was getting at a while ago as far as our Harrison Avenue situation.
Yeah, and I think this is a good point, and I've kind of been sitting on this, and I brought it up at one point, and I know you frowned upon it, Wayne. But we have a very, we have an example going on right now. And I know your construction is not going to be to the degree that theirs is, but Brother's home. And it's a great project, it's great for that neighborhood, but they have ruined a residential street. And there was nothing within our development agreement that says they're gonna come back and pave that, and that's gonna be on the city. So we learn from our mistakes, right? You learned that in the building, in
So
building a
we
building.
should have built before them.
Well, so I think, that's something that we need to look at as a city. What are our requirements gonna be with Sherman, with Martz? Harrison may be a far stretch. Fair Street is another, good street that impacted by the construction, impacted by the traffic. And, are you willing to work with the city and, repaving some of those areas, prior to opening up in whatever, 2020?
Yeah, certainly, obviously, with the impact traffic studies being reviewed, and obviously we've talked about widening Sherman, whatever the alleyway needs to be, if it needs to be two-way from that end. As you said, the requirements of the city will be something we have to follow. I think Fair's in pretty good shape. I mean, we can look at that.
And it is now, but Oakwood, forget which one that is, wasn't in bad shape before they started.
Oakview?
It's Oak something.
Yeah.
It's just oak. I think it's just oak.
Okay.
Oak.
Yeah, and I mean, down to the curve and kind of around with the big dump trucks and everything and bringing the heavy equipment in,
Yeah,
so.
certainly that's reasonable to say if we damage existing streets.
Yeah, so, and then the next, one of the other things we'd like to cover is kind of going around here in a circular fashion, are the properties that are not owned by the hospital. And I agree, we're in the very early stages, and part of our zoning, when we have commercial that butts up to a residential are the screening issues. Can you talk a little bit about that for the council and then anybody else that might be watching? What kind of steps are you going to take to minimize the impact on the neighboring properties?
Kind of a little bit to the screening of where the landscape screening, where the zoning butts up against the residential.
Sure, we can go ahead and meet zoning code in that strip between the parking on the north, there between the north, parking in the residence to the north, and then also on the south side as well. I think it'd be screening considered, right?
Here,
Off Harrison.
here, basically where the alley was.
But, so the issue you have there, you don't wanna vacate that first section that we've been talking about. You have houses, so we're talking about the top left-hand corner. That's still going to be public right-of-way. So what are you, I mean, how would you screen that? You can't screen in the right of way, so you'd have to screen on your property,
Outside,
on the west side. So are we just talking all arborvitae's all the way down through there? Are we talking a fence? What?
We would refer to the zoning code.
You could use either one. I'm back, I mean, how do you envision impacting the neighborhoods?
What we did on the north side, prior to us owning the property, in this parking lot, we have arborvitae on both sides. But we put this in before we owned those two properties. We lined, if you drive by there, they're completely lined with trees. I would assume we would do something similar.
Okay.
I'd rather do greenery than
The fence.
fence.
Yeah, yeah.
Totally agree.
From that end.
Totally agree.
We
Okay.
have a landscape architect on staff that's part of our services, go ahead and design that, and I agree that the natural screening is much better than the fence.
So while we're talking about that, if you know Central, when you get down near Fair Street, we have a nice tall radio tower, we got a great big white oxygen tank and a trash compactor. We're gonna actually have shrubbery all along there. There's a building on the corner there that's called the Annex, that's actually coming down before we do that. Because then the entrance will be this brown entrance getting back into the dock. Then that again will all be shrubbery, so it'll be much more of a green belt type of look to all the property.
So getting around the fair, we have the traffic impact study. I don't know, have you had a chance to really dive into it?
So Oaks Engineering has reviewed it from a traffic standpoint, and I've been copied on their responses. A quick summary of the response is basically this addition is not viewed to be increasing new traffic in large amounts. It's more of a redirection of traffic because if Central Avenue is no longer there. Essentially, any additional delays that may be added are very minor, are minuscule. They didn't see any issues with the traffic study and redirecting traffic as would be proposed by this traffic flow. One of the things that they brought up was that, in fact, some of the delays modeled through their traffic impact study may, as time goes on, actually decrease as the local drivers get to understand how traffic's flowing. People don't always drive as we think they may. They think they may, looking at a map saying, well, this might be the quickest way. I might not like to sit here and look left. I might turn right and go a different way, for example.
Have you done a count on Central, how many vehicles use that street during the day?
I'm going to defer that to Kleinger's. They did the study, and as choice one, we did not review the traffic impact study, so I'm just kind of summarizing what Oaks Engineering did. Yeah, what I read. So
Correct. And Matt,
Well,
we're doing it accordingly.
why I ask that is Central seems to be more of a through street from Fair getting all the way uptown because they've closed down certain streets for railroad crossings. So there's Central and there's Wayne that you can travel south to north and get straight through and get uptown without getting on, say, Washington. My thing is that people travel, and I travel Central, and people traveling down Central, they're now going to be impacting Harrison and Schweitzer. And that's why I wonder, how many, do we have 1,000 cars using that a day, 500? And another thing that I'm interested in is what's the impact on Harrison as far as parking? Here it seems like when the parking lots came into and the emergency room was moved to the rear of the hospital, there was now a lot of parking taken off of Central during that time. So is there going to be an impact of that on Harrison for view obstructions or whatever?
So I will kind of take the first question of whether count's done on Central.
Yes.
The answer to that is yes, and I have the PDF copy of the impact study here that if you guys, council would like, I'd be happy to pass around. You can see kind of the blue shaded area is the Wayne Hospital complex, and all of the red circles are where they did traffic counts. So we worked, Choice One, Oaks, Engineering, the city worked with Kleinger's on where do we want counts taken. So we had counts taken on Central, basically on both sides. I think that's fair, and on Sherman, there in the center. We also had counts on Schweitzer, counts on Harrison, and then a couple, we had one at Fair and, is that Washington? And one at Sherman in Washington as well.
Because we wanted to go out and see.
See how, well, why I say this, everything that happens around that hospital impacts the neighborhoods. Little things. They went smoke-free. I owned a house on Central. Where do they smoke? They go to the residential neighborhood, so they stay off the campus. They smoke right in front of the house all the time, throw their cigarette butts and everything down. So it has an impact. I no longer have that house. It's actually a parking lot now.
Most of the street parking, those are all employees. One of the advantages of the parking that we're adding is most of our employees should be able to park in a lot. We still do lease parking at the fairgrounds.
Yes.
There's a number of people that park there because they work on the south end of the building. I don't know if we'll ever stop that. The intent here is that we give our employees off the streets into a parking lot.
Which is
You just give them a number.
Also, on Central, traffic north of Sherman is not a lot, as you know, that's parking on both sides, and you can't get two cars by each other going down there. So I think it becomes a bigger traffic thing once you get up to the stop sign, and then you go up from there across the road.
Each way and then turn into that direction. Where's Schweitzer?
Where's Central? Oh, here's Central.
Central.
Could you perhaps provide the numbers from those traffic studies to members of council at some point in time in a hard copy?
Per hour.
Yeah. The city, I think
We
Chad.
have it.
You have
Yeah,
it?
we have it in the.
Okay, I wasn't aware that you had it.
Yeah.
When we're looking at these
You hadn't
numbers
shared that
here,
in committees.
what's the time frame on these?
So those are just, in Kyle will explain it more here.
Because like,
So those are the peak hour counts, your AM peak and your PM peak.
Hourly
It's
rate.
not the,
it's an hourly rate?
it's an hourly rate during the peak hours in the morning and then the evening. So you're not looking at a total daily volume, but you're looking at the highest capacities that you're seeing in the evening times and in the morning times. That's what those numbers are representing.
It's interesting.
Wayne, if I recall correctly, way back in the preliminary discussion of this, the existing medical office building
Right,
was proposed that it be gone.
Yeah.
Now is it going to stay?
yeah, for the time being.
Okay,
What we have is under our project construction, $56 million is roughly our capacity. I think 60 is the capacity. If we built the building, that put it up near to 80.
okay.
So we are looking at alternatives to build the building, and basically, we're reserving what amounts to a pad, which will be parking under this if we don't build. And so if we do get another proposed vendor that does this, the building would go here after the building is built, and we would demolish the existing MOB.
And these are the numbers.
I take it that that would probably go up
I
more of
I
a,
think it'd be the same height as the
Yeah.
hospital
Of the
expansion.
hospital.
so a couple stories?
Yeah.
Okay,
It's a tall 2 stories. It's-
Okay.
Or a short 3.
okay.
That makes sense to you
One
now?
of the other things I wanted to point out about this expansion along the east side here is right now, you know, this is the ambulance entry, this is the service entry here. One of the things that this addition does is it really cleans up this view of this side of the hospital. So
Oh, that's the
Trinity has been very sensitive to the presentation, understanding that this is residential on this side. You know, this is really your urban edge
Here, it looks
of
like
the campus, and
right there.
they've been sensitive to the fact that this is a residential edge. So that's something that they're taking into consideration as they're looking at landscaping and the design of the building, so,
Yeah.
You definitely have two fronts.
right.
Yeah.
There's your numbers for Sherman.
For Sherman,
There's
yeah.
Central, Harrison.
And the good news is only the people that are in our houses right now that have to look at the terrible backside, including our green chimney.
Oh, okay. Mm. Yeah, okay. Great. Thank you. Are there any members of council or administration have any questions for the people from Wayne Healthcare?
When's the whole project supposed to be concluded?
In 2020, presuming we get into the ground early in 2019.
Depends on the weather.
Yeah. Well, no, it's the whole sequence of things. We have to do
Right.
you all, we have to get a guaranteed maximum price, we have to get the final financing. We have all the preliminary financial things that are done. We have to get a vendor that will actually place the loan, those types of things. So we're looking at early
2020-ish.
Yeah, it'd be,
Late 2020.
October-ish, 2020.
Mr. Berg?
Yes.
I think Assistant Chief.
Didn't see
Fritz
it.
wants to
Okay.
comment on this.
Sure.
Chief Fritz, go ahead.
I got a question in regards to page 17 of the picture in the diagram that you have there. The addition of the materials and handling hallway going down the side of the east side of the building. That's right over our fire department connection. That's currently where it's at now. So me and the chief was just discussing what is the plan for continuance of that fire department connection during the construction phase of this and in the future where this hallway goes.
I can speak to that. That connection would be rerouted towards the north, towards the EMS area, and then it would be in a freestanding outlet above ground that you would then connect into. So you would no longer need to connect in towards that back side, which will now be a courtyard that's difficult to access. We would move that more towards the north with accessibility from Sherman.
So your plan is to run an underground piping underneath the new corridor that you will maintain in the event of an emergency or a collapse or anything?
Correct. Hospital will maintain.
The fire pump room is there where it's at. That would say that obviously before we take that out, we want to have some in place. Facility side, we're not going to do it without. Back feet is purchased.
In a proposed entrance for construction vehicles and materials, is that off Fair Street? I asked this in.
We haven't talked about that, but I would say that's probably what we're going to want to put off of there.
Because currently the route of travel and emergency action plan for our second vehicle coming in is down Schweitzer around Fair and to that hydrant that's there available now within that 75-foot. So during that construction phase, if you put it on that side, we had to look at changing our emergency action plan, our route of travel for our supply truck.
We'll have to sit down with you and show it to contractors and make sure we have that in place before we start that.
Great.
That's one of our next steps is the logistic plan and construction.
Great.
Certainly look forward to feedback.
Further?
Well, I think, I know that you stated many times that no decisions are going to be made this evening.
Right.
I did notice one thing on the, and this is probably an area question, on the timeline. We had, you have zoning down before closing down Central. There's no reason to rezone it if we're not gonna close down Central, right? Because you're probably not gonna build if we're not gonna close down Central. So we should probably worry about the vacation of Central before we worry about whether or not you're gonna take this to planning and zoning and ask for a zoning change. And planning and zoning has nothing in the vacation of city right of way, is that correct? It's strictly on this council. Whether they agree to it or not, can you explain the vacation process at all? Is it merely just an ordinance? And,
Right away.
Pardon?
It's an ordinance vacating that right.
and would it need
Like
a,
anything else, you probably would have to have it lay over for 30 days. I'd have to look at the specifics of it, but I think you have to have it available for public inspection before you be able to actually act.
Actually act on it. And once it's prepared, then you could set a 30-day period.
Right.
Now, does the alleys have to be separate then?
Well, they're all public right of ways.
Yes.
Okay.
So it could all be done at once. You don't need one ordinance per. And then just
Yes.
another,
To answer your
does it
question.
need to be surveyed and have a legal description?
I don't know how you're gonna define it if you don't.
But that should be on them.
That's correct.
So they would have to provide of what, we talked about those boundaries. So you'd have to provide that as well. Obviously, they have some work, how does council want to make this decision to whether or not to tell them to proceed with the vacation?
I think they should proceed with it, other than, I think there's issues with that alley that needs to be addressed.
Those issues, how do you know as you're vacating?
Mm-hmm.
So should they bring back a legal description of what they want, and we'll review it, and
And we'll take that corner of
Would
the
that be-
alley into consideration.
Okay.
Would that be submitted to Kurt for review, or does it come back to council?
Sir Kurt and Chad, and we would get it to
Yeah.
law director, or, the
Well,
engineer would obviously want
Yeah.
would want to review it. Who's talking right now? Matt, you would review our, the legal description of
Yes.
our right-of-way
Absolutely.
and kind of give your approval to it, and then we would forward it to council for a vote. I don't want to say approval.
Yeah, it would have to be done in the form of, the law director would prepare the legislation, and council would consider.
You
it.
folks would provide the exhibit to the legislation.
As you know, there are two ways that legislation is passed. Well, several, but with an emergency clause, and I don't think we want to do this with an emergency clause. But it requires 3 readings. Either suspend the rules and give it second and third reading by title the same night, or it could go 3 consecutive council sessions. 2 more after the first reading. And that's up to this council as to what they want to do as far as expediting it with suspending the rules, or to have each reading in 3 different sessions. So that's, I just wanted to make you aware of the possibilities, okay? But I like the idea of the preparation of the description, and then it'd be on file for 30 days for anyone to review. Okay?
And then as far as the record, we'll get,
Well, understand that if somebody is vehemently opposed and is passed as an emergency, they can circulate a petition and
Right.
put it on the ballot.
but they would have to do that within the 30, you would let it set for 30 days to see if a referendum.
Right.
Well, that's the way it works.
Yeah, so you go 3 readings, then it sets for 30 days. Nobody takes out a petition at the Board of Elections office, clear Senate, at least on the vacation part. Then you have the hurdle to jump through with planning and zoning to get those various changes. And then again, that comes back to council,
Right.
goes through a hearing process.
For the,
You've been through
for
that
the
process.
rezoning. Anything further from anyone? Anyone else?
We'd like to thank you for your time.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
It's
Don't think
something
yes.
pretty significant for the city of Greenville, and we appreciate the efforts and the,
We'll be proud of it at the back end.
pardon?
We'll be proud of it at the back end.
That's right. That's right. Gotta spruce up your backside, that's good.
So I got complaints when we first opened the new part of the building that it was way too opulent for Greenville, but we've gotten over it. It's okay. And we get a lot of compliments, and also you're in some national architecture magazine because that won an award for the design of that lobby.
Okay, great.
Good deal.
It's a nice facility.
I didn't call that at the beginning of the thing, but we have 6 members present. Would you please note that in the minutes?
Yeah, we should go.
I see. All right. If there's nothing further, yes, sir, Mayor.
Just a comment, and as time goes along, when you talk about what you're gonna do and the plans and everything, it might help maybe a little bit more. I know you've been out in the community and talking about what's going on, but maybe share a little bit more on how this is gonna help the people. They don't quite understand a lot, you know, you put a name to something, what's that really mean for them? You know, it's like, how many,
We
why?
have an whole marketing plan, but it's contingent upon getting through some of these things, so.
Right.
If you get along there, they go, oh, by the way, you can't do it. That's the thing, but we do have that. I mean, we do the typical thing, rotaries
Coming.
and Kiwanis and Lions, all the various clubs.
You don't get it, you know, you're adding, what, 30-some rooms, basically private.
Well, we're replacing.
I've been in
Yeah,
places.
that's the major thing. We're really not replacing any beds as such.
Okay.
I mean, not adding any. We're
That's some of the
replacing.
conversation I've had with people is that, how can you, how do you survive in a community like this with this size of a hospital and you don't have that many beds? People don't get it, I guess, somewhat. So that's kind of the thing. And then, you know, you must be going to sell this place as soon as you get done.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know, just things that you hear, and I know you hear it too.
For your
But, you know, it's
information,
just,
we do have a public
we'll talk
document
about
that is our strategic plan. It's a single page. And one of the things that the board is adamant about, if it is not on the plan, we don't do it. In my 12 years, you have never seen anything on the strategic plan about ever selling the hospital. We have a lot of joint venture friends.
Yeah.
You know, we're tied in with Ohio State University, with Premier Health, with Kettering Health Network. So we do an awful lot of things with other people, and that's how we survive. Because we're using some of their money and some of our money and some of their experts to come and deliver high quality care in our community. I think the Cancer Center is the best example. That's a national award winner, 6 years in a row for quality of care. We couldn't do it on our own, but with our partners, that has worked extremely well for the community. And you don't have to go all the way to Dayton to get radiation therapy treatment. So,
Wayne,
yes,
I've got cancer. I've been out there, and they do a fantastic job.
thank you. We just want to do more of that, especially the OB part. We have a nice OB in a 1938 building. It's about time to be retired.
I don't think I need that.
thanks.
You don't need that.
Okay, anything for anyone else? This time I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion, Ms. Howdeshell to adjourn. Call roll, please.
Whitaker?
Yes.
Wright?
Tell Kurt that.
Wright?
Yes.
Godwin?
Yes.
Hensley?
Yes.
Howdeshell?
Yes.
Rogers?
Yes.
We are adjourned. Thank you and have a good evening.
Straighten up, Dory.
I don't like the one-way alley.
Hey, thanks, guys. Appreciate your help.
Good job.
Dory?